And now that we've named them, we can kind of explore how these things are showing up for you. Because let's be honest, you can't shift what you haven't seen clearly. And these behaviors don't always scream. Sometimes they just whisper, or they feel like it's just always been who you are, this mistaken identity. So sometimes they show up in, like I said, like in your pricing, in your schedule. Maybe your schedule is crazy busy, in your relationships, and in your body. The body really does keep the score. So we're going to look at this framework that I've created called Power Scan, that we're going to kind of do here. And this is going to help us to identify exactly where you might be leaking energy or abandoning yourself or staying small when really like you're meant for so much more. So P is about the patterns. Which patterns do you repeat? Even though they're not helping you thrive. Do you procrastinate on promoting offers because you're too afraid to be, too much? Do you take on more than your share of work at home, maybe because it's just easier? Do you start and stop things because you're waiting for someone else to approve or validate your decisions? I had a seven-figure entrepreneur I was working with, who constantly postponed her launches, with like her personal brand because she kept being afraid that she was going to be judged by her peers. And as we're working together, it's like, okay, here's the childhood story coming out. And it was be good, stay humble, don't make waves. That was like what was underneath the current of all of it. And so her adult reality became, that invisibility was sabotaging her ability to make the impact that she wanted and the income. She kind of reached this ceiling that she couldn't get through until she got those deeper things out of the way. The O in Power Scan is about overgiving. So where are you giving too much without being asked or without anything in return? Do you over deliver in your work out of fear that, clients or whoever you serve will leave or think that you're not worth it? Do you keep saying yes to favors or calls or commitments that drain your energy? Um, are you giving more to your partner or your friends or your family than you're giving to yourself? There was a time when my older two kids were pretty little still. They were in elementary school, I guess. And I said yes to this like huge volunteer event at their school, even though my calendar was already full and like my body was screaming for rest. Why did I do it? Because I didn't want to be that mom. I didn't want to be the one that doesn't, step up for the school. And so I projected judgment onto myself. And what happened? I ended up getting sick, snappy with my kids, resented every second of the work that I was doing. That's not kindness. It doesn't even like embody the spirit of volunteerism. It was self-abandonment that was dressed up as being helpful. So yeah, Mary Beth says, I give, people offer to give back. I feel guilty and say no. So that crosses over from what we're talking about here today, also, Mary Beth, into like worthiness and and the ability to receive. Probably crosses into feminine energies and things like that too. So that's an important one to examine more. The W in the Power Scan is going to bring us into withholding. Where are you silencing yourself? Where are you playing small in your life? Because I know the people in my community, they're not people who have a desire to play small. They've got big dreams, big goals, and big desire to overcome the things that might be getting in their way. So, are you holding back your real opinions, your desires, and your boundaries? Are you editing your expression so that it's more likable and it doesn't, rock the boat? Are you waiting for permission to show up in your full power? Somebody to tell you that it's okay. Um, I worked with this professional speaker last year, one of my clients for like 6 months in 2024, and she was great, and she wouldn't raise her rates despite. I mean, she actually was getting a good amount of talks to do, keeping busier than she really wanted to be because she didn't want to be too expensive. She didn't want, to lose the clients that she already had or repeat customers, things of that nature. But underneath of that was just like what we're talking about, is this fear of taking up space, not being the good girl that's always generous, and this fear of being seen as as greedy or not having to work as hard to make the same money, which also comes back to conditioning that a lot of us have, which is, kind of that whole like hard day's work for a hard day's pay. And for her, it was like, okay, she could do 8 talks and make, 20K and run herself ragged. And then she found herself in a place where she was able to do like 2 talks for 20K and actually have the time to enjoy her life, and everything that she had worked so hard to create. And that's when the internal backlash kind of comes out. But luckily, she was able to see the importance of like the subconscious upgrades that she needed. And at this point now, she's actually doing like a few talks a month between like 5 and 10K a piece and not feeling the need to overbook herself. We can have a really hard time slowing down, especially, those of us that here like me, ADHD entrepreneurs. That slowness can feel really challenging to our nervous systems. And anyway, yeah, she's like headed to Italy with her family next month, taking time off, taking a break. But she could clearly see that if she hadn't upgraded her own programming, she would still be in that hustle and strive pattern and selling herself short. So with E in the power scan, we're heading on to expectations. So whose expectations are you living under that aren't yours? Are your expectations yours? Or are they your parents or industry norms, social media, friends, cultural stories? Are you chasing goals that don't align with your truth? Are you exhausted? Like trying to live up to a role that you didn't consistently choose? Um, another client story, but I had another client who she told me once in a session as her business was growing, she's like, I didn't even want to scale my business. I just thought I was supposed to. And the result of that was that she had a lot of chronic stress along, I mean, she was like me in her mid 40s. She was having a lot of hormone imbalances at the time and identity crisis, like who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to show up? All this kind of stuff. And, it turned out like she actually really enjoyed the income and the relationships that she got to have with her one-on-one work without scaling it. And it wasn't the right time or the model for her to scale. So when we were able to have her release those expectations that weren't hers and to shift her identity so that she felt safe letting go of the false expectations, she made room for what felt like authentic abundance, what was right for her at that time. Um, and then the R in the power scan is resentment, which we've talked about a little bit already, but it's like, hey, where is this simmering for you? If you're feeling unappreciated, taken for granted, overused, there's likely a boundary waiting to be set. Resentment is often the body's way of saying, we've been too polite for too long. Time to take a look at things. And it's not bad. Resentment is not a bad thing. It's information, it's data. It tells us where we've said yes to something that we actually didn't want. So, I've definitely agreed to obligations out of guilt before. And I can think of a family obligation a few years back, spent the entire week leading up to it, feeling anxious, feeling bitter, thought I was being nice, but actually leaking energy, missing some things that I really cared about in the process, and building a mountain of inner tension that affected my mood. It affected my relationships in the household with my kids and my husband, and it also affected my focus and my energy. And then it in turn affects the energy and the presence that you have when you're carrying out the thing that you agreed to. So that particular example was a turning point for me. I realized that, self-sacrifice isn't love. It's just this unspoken resentment in disguise. And I also realized if I'm going to commit to something, and this is kind of my standard at this point, anything I commit to that's going to tether my time or alter my calendar, I'm going to commit to fully being there and enjoying myself as much as possible. And it really does. It changes everything.